Hey, what's up? Jeff Ratcliffe here. You know, at the running back position, every year in fantasy football drafts, it's about identifying guys who you can get a little bit later on, who have the potential to move up a couple tiers or even break out further than that. Think about it through the last couple years, some of these guys who you're able to get as second or third round picks at the position who end up being elite fantasy options. Of course, Todd Gurley in 2017, somebody maybe like Christian McCaffrey last year. So who is that guy this year? Who has the chance to go from a front-end RB2 or a back-end RB1 to an elite fantasy option? I think there are 5 guys who stand out to me who all have that chance of making the jump into elite territory, and some of them are even bigger values than others. But let's start with the guys going earliest in ADP. These are guys you probably could get in the second round of your drafts this year. At the top of my list, I have Joe Mixon. Now, in his rookie season, we knew that Mixon had bell cow capability, a guy who could potentially see 20 touches per game, but in his rookie season, he wasn't very efficient, right? 3.4 yards per carry. That just doesn't get it done. And there wasn't a ton of volume. He saw a decent workload. It increased over the course of the season, but it was really last year where that workload kicked in. He was a true bell cow. 19.9 touches per game. There were only 5 running backs in the NFL last year who averaged over 20 touches per game. So he's right up there with the league leaders. But the offense didn't do him any favors. You know, he did go from 3.4, like I mentioned before, to 5 yards per carry. So he increased in efficiency, but the overall state of the offense wasn't good. So Mixon, from a fantasy standpoint, wasn't a home run, wasn't an elite option last year. However, exciting things are developing in Cincinnati. Zach Taylor comes in as the head coach, very likely going to instill an offense that is going to be similar to what we saw in Los Angeles with Sean McVay. And if that happens, Joe Mixon could be facing a lot of sub-package defense. Now, that just simply means there's going to be an extra defensive back on the field. When running backs face nickel or dime defense, they excel. You know, you're going to see greater efficiency because of that extra defensive back on the field. So if Mixon sees that, plus plenty of volume in that offense, he really does have the chance to make that jump to elite fantasy territory. After Mixon, how about Dalvin Cook? I know somewhat of an afterthought at times because in his first 2 professional seasons, he's combined for 16 games played. Of course, in his rookie season, he had those 2 big weeks out of the first 4 weeks of the year, but tore his ACL in that 4th week, so out for the season there. And then last year got off to a really slow start. The injuries mounted. You know, you could tell he was obviously hampered in the beginning part of the season. But to Dalvin Cook's credit, he did finish strong, right? We saw in weeks 13, 14, and 15, he posted top 10 fantasy finishes, so that bodes positively. We know the Minnesota offense has a lot of talent, a lot of surrounding talent, so that always helps. I love getting good running backs on good teams, right? Good running backs on bad teams, it takes a special player to really excel for fantasy purposes. But if you have a good running back on a good team, the whole situation, the rising tide lifts up their fantasy value as well. And that's what we see with Dalvin Cook. Now you look down the depth chart as well, and there's minimal competition for touches. Latavius Murray is out of the mix. They draft Alexander Mattison, who's more of a handcuff than anything to Dalvin Cook. So he is primed with that ACL now a year plus in the rearview mirror. He is primed for a big season here in 2019. He's definitely a breakout candidate. Now, if we go a little bit further, these are guys that you may be looking at possibly in the 3rd or 4th rounds, depending on how your draft plays out. I'm going to kick it off with Derrick Henry. The Titans figured out something last year. Over the first 12 games, Derrick Henry saw more than a dozen carries 2 times. That's it. He was 39th in fantasy scoring over that span of time. After that, over the final 4 games, they give him a ton of touches. They feed him the rock, and he was the #1 fantasy running back. Of course, puts up 7 touchdowns, averages an enormous 6.7 yards per carry. He was an absolute beast. Now, the question, will they continue with that? You know, did they learn from this And we don't know for certain. You never know year in, year out what these teams are precisely going to do. You can think you know, but ultimately until it happens, you really don't know. So we think we're going to see an uptick in his carries, but the team could very well likely go back to what they were doing before. However, you have to admit the momentum is very enticing there. And if Henry gets a full workload, if you see upwards of 275 or even close to 300 carries out of Derrick Henry, it's going to be hard for him to not break into that elite tier. So Derrick Henry, a lot of upside, maybe not as high of a floor as Dalvin Cook or Joe Mixon, but certainly just as high of a ceiling potentially in that offense if he gets those carries. After Derrick Henry, how about Aaron Jones? I mean, talk about explosive. This guy, we know he has explosive upside, but for some reason, the previous regime in place in Green Bay, they just wanted to use a committee back situation. They had Jamal Williams there, and they had Aaron Jones, and despite the fact that Aaron Jones was clearly the more explosive player, clearly higher upside, they continued to use Jamal Williams. Well, of course, the previous regime is gone. Matt LaFleur is in place, so change could certainly happen this year. What we know about Aaron Jones last year, despite the fact that he was in that committee situation, he scored 9 combined touchdowns. We've seen the explosive ability over the last 2 seasons, and you don't have to pay the price of even Derrick Henry for Aaron Jones. I mean, you could be looking at him as a late 3rd or maybe even a 4th round guy in 12-team leagues this year. He has that potential now, of course, a much longer shot than the first 3 guys. But if you're looking at trying to get that bang for the buck, Aaron Jones certainly offers a lot of that. One more, and this is the shoot for the moon play because we really have no clue here, but I'm going with Josh Jacobs, and I'll tell you exactly why. When you look at Josh Jacobs and what he brings to the table, he didn't do a lot at the college level, but that wasn't because of skill. It was because Alabama was freaking loaded up at the running back position. What he brings, though, is an Alvin Kamara-like skill set where he can run between the tackles, but he is also a darn good pass catcher out of the backfield. He gives you that dual threat dynamic, which for PPR leagues is so optimal. On a team that in theory should be better this year. We know the Raiders went out, they brought in the big name, right? Antonio Brown. They revamped their wide receiver core. It's the second year of the Gruden regime. We'll see what ultimately plays out there, but there's prime opportunity for Jacobs here. Isaiah Crowell gets hurt in the offseason, so there's really no competition for touches. Yes, Jalen Richard is still there, but really, this looks like Josh Jacobs' show. And I know comparing somebody to Alvin Kamara right now here in 2019 sounds quite bold, but let's remember, in 2017, before Kamara hit, before his rookie season, people didn't realize how great he was going to be. We just knew, yeah, guy can catch the ball out of the backfield, and he can run between the tackles a little bit. That's exactly what Josh Jacobs brings. So while, 2019 Alvin Kamara maybe not, but 2017 skill set Alvin Kamara, very interesting comparison there. And it is a stretch to expect him to jump into the elite tier, but if you want to shoot for the moon with one of these rookies this year, Jacobs is certainly your best bet. If you want to see where all of these guys rank in the Pro Football Focus staff fantasy rankings, go check those out. Of course, we also have projections for you, and you can practice drafting. Where can you get these guys? Well, you can practice that in our Draft Master tool. You can get all of those over at ProFootballFocus.com.